Chandler Wahrmund. I'm an educator at Washington-on-the-Brazos. More specifically, I work at the Fanthorpe Inn over in Anderson, but I get around to all of the sites. And so today I'm here to talk to you about all 4 sites that compose the Washington-on-the-Brazos complex. There are several times where I'll meet people and they'll say, "Oh, you work at Washington-on-the-Brazos, I love being there," and then I'll say, "Oh, and you've been to the farm, right?" And they say, "There's a farm there?" There are 4 distinct sites that make up Washington-on-the-Brazos. That's Independence Hall, the Star of the Republic Museum, Barrington Plantation, and then you can come visit me over in Anderson. Even though we're about 15 miles away, we're still part of the Washington-on-the-Brazos family, and that's the Fanthorpe Inn. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of each of these places. I'm going to share with you one of my favorite objects from each of these 4 places. So starting off, the reason that it all exists, Independence Hall. So it is on that spot in March of 1836 that Texas declared independence from Mexico. That is a reproduction building, but built to the specifications and the materials of what it would have looked like if you were there in March of 1836. Washington in March 1836, honestly, it didn't look a whole lot different than it does today. There really wasn't anything there. One of the people who was witnessing the convention, Colonel Fairfax Gray, he talks about how this is not really a place that I would think worthy of birthing a new republic. That it's a few shanties put together, that it's mud streets, just a rough clearing of woods, that there are tree stumps still in the middle of the road, because there are fully grown trees there just a few weeks before that had been cut down to make the buildings of the town. Washington was selected as the place to hold this convention primarily because it was so obscure. All of the big towns in Texas didn't really want all of the heat that was associated with being the center of the convention against Mexico. Washington was like, "Hey, come on, guys, go ahead. We only have 3 good buildings, but come on in." This building is the reproduction of Noah Byers' general store. So Noah Byers was the local gunsmith, blacksmith, and Baptist preacher. Of those 3, the Baptist preacher was the one that was the illegal profession in the Republic of Mexico. This was the only building that had a full floor in it, raised above the ground. Most of the other ones had just dirt floors. In March of 1836, 59 men gathered there from all over colonial Texas to settle the debate on independence from Mexico, from Santa Anna, who had become dictator there. We have all sorts of events that go on there throughout the year. Our biggest event of the year is always Texas Independence Day, March 2nd. Usually this event is going to be the Saturday closest to that March 2nd. Next year in 2024, March 2nd is a Saturday, so that's going to be a really big shindig. So we get all sorts of people to come in, and each one of those men is portraying an actual delegate who was in the hall. I'm sure Scott McMahon here is saying something very important. You get to see all the deliberations that would have gone on during that time. We call Washington-on-the-Brazos the place where Texas became Texas. And that's not just a billboard, that's not just a t-shirt. Before those men gathered in that room in March of 1836, Texas was some far-off province of New Spain that no one really knew about, never had a really good map of the place. In the 1820s and 30s, Texas was a state connected to another state within Mexico, Coahuila y Tejas. But here, these men made Texas its own idea, its own entity. There's an obelisk that is in front of the Independence Hall. It reads, "Here a nation was born." That's because of what those men did there in March of 1836. And what they did has ripples that affect us to this very day. It is because of those men and declaring Texas a republic. It then is a country for 10 years. It is then annexed by the United States. When that happens, the United States goes to war with Mexico. As a result of that war, the United States gets all of the territory going from Texas to California. That makes the United States a continental power. You think of all of the natural resources and the land and everything that gave us to then protect democracy in World War I and II. All of these things can be tied back to what those men did there in March of 1836. It's a phenomenal place because it's so humble. It's in the middle of nowhere. But the things that happened there have affected us to this very day. So my favorite object that we have in Independence Hall is this very unassuming box on top of the table. Anybody want to take a guess as to what might be held in that box? Okay, a ballot box. Those are good. That's a good idea. Any other guesses? Documents, maybe a little library, have some books in there. The weather that was happening in the March of 1836, it was a bitter winter. It was 26 to 28 degrees outside, freezing, sleet, rain, snow, ice. The only thing that people had, you look in this building, there's no stove, there's no fireplace. All these men had to keep warm were the coats on their back, the blankets that they brought with them, and booze. This box is called a cellaret, and it would hold wine and whiskey and rum, all the things that were the fuel of this Texas Revolution. This is what they were all drinking when they were coming up with the ideas of independence and republic. And you can imagine that they would just get angrier and angrier at Santa Ana as the day went on, as they continued to imbibe. Sam Houston, his birthday is March 2nd, the same as Texas Independence Day. He talks about March 2nd, 1836 as being a grand day. He had a whole lot of eggnog. And when you come and see us during our Texas Independence Day celebration, the delegates want to make sure that they're providing you as an authentic experience as possible, which can sometimes lead to a very historically accurate nap. That's my little piece about Independence Hall. The next little place that you can visit further into the park is the Star of the Republic Museum. This is a two-story museum. It was built in 1970. It is the only museum in the state that was created by the state legislature for the sole purpose of preserving the history and the material culture of the Republic of Texas. It is a two-story museum, thousands of artifacts from the Republic of Texas time period. This was the vision of Washington County Representative and Texas Speaker of the House, Gus Mutcher, and he just passed away a few weeks ago. He was a representative from Washington County in the 1960s and 70s, and having Independence Hall, the place where Texas became Texas, in his district, and yet it's in the middle of nowhere now. So he wanted to make sure that people would come and see the story that started right here at Washington. And so they appropriated the funds and had this museum constructed in 1970. I would encourage everyone to go and visit over this summer because we're about to close down the museum. The museum will be closed for a period of 2 years. We're going to have an extensive renovation. Walls are going to be taken out, new walls are going to be built out, the carport's going to be filled in, all sorts of things are going to happen. All the artifacts will stay and just be displayed in different ways. But this is kind of your last few months to see the museum as it has been for the last 20 years. I would encourage everyone to come and visit us and see that. When looking at all of these thousands of objects to choose from, to share one with all of you, it can be a bit overwhelming. But there is one that really spoke out to me, and that is this flag. This is one of the only flags that still exists to this day that flew over the Republic of Texas. This flag is over 180 years old. It was made in 1842. Any other flag that you see is going to be from after that period. honestly, I think this might be the only flag that was truly documented that we know flew over Texas while it was a separate nation. And even if that was it, if this just flew over someone's house for 2 days in 1842, that would be enough to preserve it. But the story that this flag has is even more remarkable on top of that, because this is the flag that was flown by the Meyer expedition. In 1842, maybe if you remember your 7th grade text history class, you might recall that things didn't necessarily end at the plains of San Jacinto in 1836. That Mexico was still pretty upset about us breaking away, and they continued to come back into Texas multiple times over the time that we were a republic. In 1842, the Mexican army invaded. They took San Antonio. And when they did that, they had to move the capital, because the capital was Austin. Austin's a little close to San Antonio for everyone to be comfortable with. And so they had to go back to Washington. And Washington was made the republic capital once again from 1842 to 1846. Well, as you can imagine, the Texas Rangers and the Texas Army were pretty peeved that the Mexican Army decided to have fun at the Riverwalk. And so they decided that they were going to take San Antonio back, drive the Mexican Army back across the Nueces River, then across the Rio Grande River. At that point, in December of 1842, President Sam Houston said, "That's it. We've now done what we needed to do. We've pushed the Mexican Army outside of our bounds of Texas. Come back." Some of the captains and some of the soldiers agreed. They had had enough of all this fighting anyway. They had homes and families, so they left. But 170 men did not agree. And they thought, we need to teach this Mexican army a lesson. They were fed up with years of the Mexican army continuously coming into Texas territory, and so they decided they were going to give them a taste of their own medicine and go into Mexico themselves. So these 170 men crossed the Rio Grande. They went into what is now Nuevo Laredo. They continued going down the river, but eventually the Mexican army caught up with them with a much larger force, and these 170 men were captured. There were a few of them who managed to try and escape, but then they were caught a few days later. Because of their capture, the reasons behind it, because of the men who were trying to escape, Santa Anna ordered that all of the men be killed. The Mexican general who was actually in charge of keeping these men prisoner didn't think that that was the right course of action. So he decided instead to decimate the force, so to kill 10% of the men. And the way that they decided how they were going to, which 17 were going to die, is that they filled up a jar with white and black beans. So about 153 white beans and 17 black beans. And if you ever read descriptions of when they are now choosing their lot, you can see the spirit of Texas within these men, because they talk about men who are making fun of the whole thing and closing their eyes as they fish in to the jar to decide what their fate is going to be. And one man, he picked out a black bean, which was the bean that was death, and he said, "I always knew I was a winner." Those 17 men were then selected from their beans, and they were taken against a wall and they were shot. The other 153 were marched from Salado to Mexico City. They were held prisoner there for a number of months. They worked a road detail there for another month, and then they were then marched all the way to New Mexico and then let go. And then they had to come into Texas on their own. That is the flag that those men carried with them. And the story behind that and how that flag still exists, it was found in a federale office. The Mexican officials didn't even know the full story behind the flag. But there is a man there, and I'm not sure of all of the details, but he had some business that he was doing, whether he was in custody or not, with the federales, and he saw that flag and he said, that's a mighty old flag you have there. And so they started a whole process, and by the Texas Centennial, the flag was then brought back to Texas, and now at the Star of the Republic Museum, you can see that very flag. That is, I think, by far our jewel that we have at the Star of the Republic Museum. There's only one other item in the museum that might even begin to compare to how important this flag is. And that's this jacket right here, because this is the jacket of Walker, Texas Ranger. So we do have Chuck Norris's jacket that was used in the filming of Walker, Texas Ranger. And you can go up to it, and he's a tiny little fella. Like, I wear like a 48 long. This is like a 26 short. He is tiny, but hey, he might hear me from here, so I know he can whoop me up good. But, we have all of Texas's treasures at the Star of the Republic Museum. So continuing throughout the park, you can then find Barrington Plantation. This is the actual home of Dr. Anson Jones, the fourth and last president of the Republic of Texas. This home was originally constructed about 4 miles away from the site, and then was moved to the site in 1936. They actually cut it into 3 pieces and rolled it on logs all the way to the park. It then moved around in the park about 2 or 3 times, and then in the late 1990s, they set it up at this end of the park, and they've now created a whole living history farm around it. So you can go here and you can learn all about the Jones family, Jones's contributions to Texas history. He's really known as the architect of annexation, getting Texas to be brought into the United States. You can also learn about what life was like for all of the people who would have been there at the farm. So we're out there doing the work that would have been done out there, no matter how hot, no matter how cold. We're out there and we are doing the work of the farm. This is also one of the places where you can find the most out about the enslaved experience. So we have 2 slave cabins on the grounds, and talk to you about how they would cook their meals and their experience, because that was so much a part of what life was in Texas in the Revolution and Republic and early statehood periods. So when trying to pick out an object to represent Barrington, I didn't so much go with an object as much as I did a friend. So this is my friend Polo. So we do all of the work there on the farm, and we use the methods that they would have used. So we have oxen. Polo is one of our oxen. He's here looking at the camera, really hoping that we're not going back out in the fields again. So we hitch the oxen up to, you can see his yoke in the bottom corner there. We hitch that yoke up to wagons and plows and cultivators. We do all of the work just as it would have been done 180 years ago. And I'm kind of the only one who really likes Polo. We have 3 oxen. We have Polo, we have William, and we have Bo. The other guys like William and Bo more. They say that Polo is lazy. I say that he's just really smart. You see, Polo, he's tanking up right here. You can see his little water tank over there. Polo, he holds more water than a camel can. He just, he drinks it all up, and then as we are going through in the fields, about every 5 to 10 minutes, he stops and lets go of some of that water. And it takes a while. It's about 4 or 5 minutes each time. Now, Nathan here, who's driving Polo, he gets upset. He wants to get this job done and over with. And I admire him for that. But you see me in the back there, I'm very glad to have a break. I can use a break. 5 minutes. Polo, take your time. And Polo makes sure that we're not going to exhaust ourselves. Okay, we go about 10 minutes at a time. He does his business, then we get back to business. So the other guys, they're more, they're quick about it. They have, so William and Bo, they're more in line with Nathan. They start running, okay? 3,000 pounds running. I don't want to deal with that. This is 2,500 pounds at a much leisurely pace with lots of breaks in between. I'm all in with Polo. The oxen are always there to help us in making sure that we don't exhaust ourselves and don't exhaust them. So they really live a nice life. There are some people who'll come and they're only there for the 5 minutes that we're working. They're thinking, oh, those oxen, they have a bad life out there. I tell you what, William, he's 3,000 pounds. He would have made a whole lot of brisket by now if he was not an ox working at Barrington Plantation, and look at that work that he's doing there. Okay, this is most of his day. So I encourage people to come multiple times throughout the year, because anytime you come to Barrington, week to week, it's going to change because of the tasks and chores that we're doing throughout the year. I came to this job as a city slicker. I did not, my life doesn't change a whole lot when you're working in a fluorescent tomb, whether it's December or August. But working here, you're working with the seasons, and things change drastically as you go through that. How you save your energy and use that energy throughout the day changes, and the visitation experience changes throughout the year. So that's all the places that are in Washington. Now I'll talk to you about my beloved place, the place that I encourage everyone to come, and that is the Fanthorpe Inn. So this is about 25-30 minutes away from the main Washington Park. It is in Anderson, Texas. And this is a 189-year-old inn, which Henry Fanthorpe had constructed in 1834. Henry Fanthorpe was an English immigrant. He came to the United States in 1818. He came to Texas in 1831. He purchased 1,000 acres of land for $76.61 and a horse. The horse was the most expensive part. And he put his land right on the La Bahia Trail. This was one of the most highly trafficked trails in Texas. It had lasted hundreds of years. It was from the Caddo and the Alabama Coshada and the Tonquah were all using this trail. So already you had business. All you had to do was set up the inn. And so he sacrificed half of his house to be used as an inn, and he did gangbusters. Tons of people coming through, and he just kept adding on for rooms for all these people. So he puts an upper story on in 1840. In 1850, he adds 7 hotel rooms and a large dining hall. 1854, he adds another 2 stories wing with 16 hotel rooms. He has 32 rooms by the time it's all said and done. And then he creates the town of Anderson. He makes Anderson the county seat of Grimes County, which it still is to this day. And we have events that go on there, at least one every month. And a lot of times we have our reproduction stagecoach. We hitch it up with horses, give you guys a ride down to the courthouse and back. That's an experience that most people aren't going to get nowadays. And then during every one of these, we provide a unique tour. So you'll be there and you're going to get a completely different story. This last couple times we had one that was all on Henderson King Yoakum. So Yoakum is known as one of the first historians of Texas. He was Sam Houston's personal lawyer and great friend, and he stayed at the inn. So we talked all about his life. We talk about Henry and Rachel's wedding. Henry got married on Valentine's Day of 1834. So that's great for programming. We always have a wedding program in February. Henry also had the great fortune or misfortune of dying on Halloween. So every October, we deck the house out as a funeral. Black curtains, coffins, everything, go through the whole rituals that would go along with someone passing away in the 1800s. So we have tons of programming that goes on all throughout the year. By far, our biggest event happens the Saturday after Thanksgiving. That is Twilight Firelight. So this is an evening program, and it's our Christmas holiday program. So the stagecoach picks you up downtown, all the way downtown in Anderson, and will bring you up the 4 blocks to the Fanthorpe Inn. Once you're on property, it is Christmas Eve, 1854. We have dozens of people all dressed out, playing, some of them actual historical figures. So with his back turned towards us, that is Judge J.R. Kennard, who is played by Barry Graham. And then over him stoking the fire, that is the Reverend George Washington Baines, who was the Reverend of the Baptist Church in Anderson. He is also the great-grandfather of Lyndon Baines Johnson. Those, and you meet Sam Houston and all these people, and then you meet some more average people. I usually portray the German immigrant George Ehrenfurt, who was a worker there throughout the time of the inn. And so you get to experience each room as a completely different scene, all set at the holiday time. And when picking an object from my beloved Fanthorpe Inn, I had to go with the clock. So we have several original items in the home, items that were there 170, 180 years ago. This clock is one of them. Henry Fanthorpe purchased this clock in New York City in 1854 while he was going with his family on a summer vacation back home to England. This is a time when most people did not leave 10 miles outside the town they were born in for their entire lives. In 1854, Henry Fanthorpe took his family all the way across the continent and across the ocean to go visit the family in England. He goes up the Mississippi, up to New York City. He leaves Anderson in March. In New York City, he places an order for that clock and for a custom buggy. He then crosses the ocean. He goes to London. He sees the sights, introduces the wife to the family in Lincolnshire, and then he is back in Anderson by September of 1854. On his way back in New York City, he picks up his clock and his custom buggy. And when you come to the Fanthorpe Inn and you look in the parlor, you can now see that clock. And not only can you see the clock, this year we underwent a project to have it restored so you can hear the clock. It now works. So you can hear the ticking and the chiming of the clock just as you would have 170 years ago. And when you think about some of the famous people, Henderson King Yoakum, Kenneth Anderson, the last vice president of Texas, he died at the inn. That's why the town is named Anderson. Dr. Anson Jones was a frequent guest there. Sam Houston stayed at the inn over 13 times that we can confirm, and we think it's even more than that. So you can now go into that parlor and hear the exact same chimes that Sam Houston heard 170 years ago. One of my most beloved items and my most beloved place of working. I encourage everyone to come and visit all of the sites throughout the year because we have programs that go on throughout the year and give you completely unique experiences each time. For the Fanthorpe Inn, our next event is going to be May 13th. That is the weekend of Mother's Day. That 13th, we will be doing the stagecoach ride. And then on both days, we'll be doing a program at the house that's all about fashion and how the fashion changed from the 1830s through the 1860s. We'll have lots of ladies there who have dresses that they've made in the style of the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And we have other gentlemen there who will be showing you how the suits changed. This will be our last stagecoach ride of the season. It starts getting too hot for the horses. They don't care if we get hot, but for the horses. I thank you all so much for coming out and listening. Does anybody have any questions?